Dracula, pages 185 to 194. Letter from Mina Harker to Lucy Westenra, unopened. September 17th. My dearest Lucy, it seems an age since I have written, and I have plenty of news. Jonathan and I returned safely to England. When we arrived at Exeter, Mr. Hawkins met us, even though he had been so ill. He took us to his lovely house, where we had dinner together. After we ate, Mr. Hawkins said, "My dears, I want to drink a toast to you. I have known you both since you were children, and I love you like my own. Now, will you live here with me? I have left you this house and everything else in my will, and I want to see you enjoy it now." Wasn't that wonderful of him, Lucy? Our evening was a very, very happy one. So here we are, installed in this beautiful old house. I am busy arranging things and housekeeping, and Jonathan and Mr. Hawkins are busy all day at their law firm. How is your mother getting on? I wish I could come see you, but I don't feel that I can yet, with so much to do, and Jonathan still weakened by his illness. He is beginning to put on a little weight, thank God, but he still sometimes jumps in his sleep and wakes up shaking. These things happen less frequently, though, and I hope they will soon stop forever. And now that I have told you my news, let me ask yours. When will you be married, and where, and who is to perform the ceremony, and what will you wear, and is it to be a large or small wedding? Tell me all about it, for there is nothing which interests you which does not interest me. Goodbye, my dearest Lucy, and blessings on you. Yours, Mina. A report from Patrick Hennessy, M.D., to John Seward, M.D., September 20. My dear sir, as you asked, I am sending on the daily reports from the asylum. Regarding Renfield, there is more to say. He has had another peculiar outbreak, but fortunately no one was badly hurt. This afternoon, 2 men driving a mover's car headed to the empty mansion near these grounds. The men stopped at our gate to ask directions. I happened to see the men myself, as I was in my study having a cigarette after dinner. As one of them passed by the window of Renfield's room, the patient began to shout at him, calling him all the foul names he could think of. The man, who seemed like a nice enough fellow, only told Renfield to quiet down. Then Renfield raved on, accusing the man of robbing him and wanting to murder him, and said that he, Renfield, would stop the man even if it meant he would hang for it. The man paid him no mind, but continued on his way to the gates of the old house, while Renfield continued to curse and scream at him. I went down to see if I could discover why Renfield was so angry. To my surprise, I found him very quiet and well-behaved. I tried to get him to talk about what had happened, but he pretended not to know what I was talking about. This was clearly just a trick of his. Half an hour later, he had broken through the window in his room and was running down the road. The attendants and I followed after him, and soon we met the same moving cart, only this time it was loaded with some big wooden boxes. Before I could reach them, Renfield leaped out, pulled one of the men off the cart, and began to knock his head against the ground. It was clear he meant to kill him. The other fellow jumped down and struck Renfield over the head with the butt end of his heavy whip. It was a horrible blow, but he did not seem to feel it. He grabbed the second man also, and struggled with the 3 of us, pulling us around as if we were kittens. You know I am no lightweight, and the others were both burly men. At first he fought silently, but as we got the better of him, he began to shout, "I'll fix them! They won't rob me! I'll fight for my lord and master!" and all sorts of similar crazy stuff. It was hard work to get him back to the house and put him in the padded room. One of the attendants, Hardy, had his finger broken. The 2 movers threatened all kinds of lawsuits at first, but when I gave them each some money and paid for a round of beer, they said they didn't hold a grudge. I think they were mostly embarrassed at being beaten by a single lunatic. I did take down their names and addresses in case they might be needed later. They are as follows: Jack Smollett of King George's Road, and Thomas Snelling of Bethnal Green. They both work for Harris & Sons Moving and Shipment Company, Soho. I will report if anything more of interest happens here. Yours faithfully, Patrick Hennessy. Letter from Mina Harker to Lucy Westenra, unopened, September 18th. My dearest Lucy, such a sad thing has happened. Mr. Hawkins has died very suddenly. I never knew my own father or mother, so it really feels to me that I have lost a parent. Jonathan is very upset. It's not just that he misses his lifelong friend, who was so good to us. It is also that Jonathan says he is nervous about the greater responsibility he will now have at the law firm. He is full of doubts about himself, and these feelings are all the result of his illness. It is so awful that a sweet, strong man like him should have so little confidence. It worries me greatly, and it is hard to keep up a brave, cheerful front for his sake. I dread coming up to London, as we must day after tomorrow, for poor Mr. Hawkins wanted to be buried beside his father. I shall try to come see you, if only for a few minutes. Your loving Mina. Dr. Seward's diary, September 20th. I am miserable, low-spirited, and sick of the world and of life itself. Just now I would not care if I heard the angel of death drawing near me. And it seems he has been hovering over us lately. Arthur's father has died, and Lucy's mother, and now I took my turn watching over Lucy. We wanted Arthur to rest, but he refused at first. I convinced him by telling him that we would need his help during the day. Van Helsing was very kind to him. Come, my child, he said. You are sick and weak, and have had much sorrow. You must not be alone, for to be alone is to be full of fears. Come to the drawing room, where there is a big fire, and there are 2 sofas. You shall lie on one, and I on the other. We will keep each other company, even though we do not speak, and even if we sleep. Arthur went off with him, casting back a heart-sick look on Lucy's face, which looked whiter than her pillow. She was breathing with a harsh, gasping sound, and her face was at its worst. Her open mouth showed its pale gums, and her teeth seemed even longer and sharper than they had been in the morning. As I sat down beside her, she moved uneasily. There was a dull flapping at the window. Looking out into the full moonlight, I could see that the noise was made by a huge bat, which was probably attracted by the light. When I came back to my seat, I found that Lucy had torn away the garlic flowers from her throat. I replaced them and sat watching her. After a bit, she awoke, and I tried to interest her in eating. She took almost nothing. She no longer seemed to have the will to live that we had seen earlier in her illness. Oddly, when she awoke, she automatically held the garlic flowers close to her. But when she slept and made that harsh, gasping sound, she pushed them away. At 6 o'clock, Van Helsing came to relieve me. Arthur had then fallen into a doze, and the professor had left him in the other room. When he saw Lucy's face, I could hear his hiss of his breath, and he said to me in a sharp whisper, "Open up the blind. I want light." Then he bent down and examined her carefully. He removed the flowers and lifted the silk handkerchief from her throat. As he did so, he seemed greatly startled. "My God," he said. I bent over and looked too, and a chill came over me. The wounds on the throat had absolutely disappeared. For 5 long minutes, Van Helsing stood looking at her, his face at its most serious. Then he turned to me and said calmly, "She is dying. It will not be long now. Wake that poor boy and let him come and be with her at the end." I went to the dining room and woke up Arthur. I told him that Lucy was still asleep, but warned him as gently as I could that the end was near. He covered his face with his hands, then slid down to his knees by the sofa. There he stayed, praying, while his shoulders shook with grief. I took him by the hand and pulled him up. "Come, Art," I said. "Be brave. It will make things easier for her." We came into Lucy's room. Van Helsing had, with his usual kindness, made everything look as pleasant as possible. He had even brushed Lucy's hair so that it lay on the pillow in dark ripples. When we came into the room, she opened her eyes, and seeing him, whispered softly, "Arthur, oh my love, I'm so glad that you have come. Arthur took her hand and knelt beside her. Her face was soft with love and sadness. Then gradually her eyes closed and she sank to sleep. For a little bit her breath came and went gently like a tired child's. And then came the strange change which I had noticed in the night. Her breathing grew harsh, her mouth opened, and the pale gums drawn back made the teeth look long and sharp as an animal's. She opened her eyes, which now seemed dull and hard. In a soft, husky voice, such as I had never heard from her, she said, "Arthur, oh my love, I am so glad you have come. Kiss me." Arthur bent down eagerly, but at that instant Van Helsing swooped upon him. Grabbing him by the neck with both hands, he dragged him back and actually hurled him across the room. "Not on your life," he said. "Not for your soul and hers." And he stood between them like an angry lion. Arthur was so shocked that he did not know what to do or say. I kept watching Lucy, as did Van Helsing. We saw a look of ugly rage flit from the shadow over her face. The sharp teeth snapped together. Then her eyes closed and she breathed heavily. After a few moments, she opened her eyes, which were once again soft and loving. Putting out her pale, thin hand, she took Van Helsing's great brown one and gently hissed it. "My true friend," she said in a faint voice, "my true friend and Arthur's. Oh, protect him and give me peace." "I swear it," he said solemnly, kneeling beside her. Then he turned to Arthur and said to him, "Come, my child, take her hand and kiss her. On the forehead." Their eyes met instead of their lips, and so they parted. Lucy's eyes closed, and Van Helsing, who had been watching closely, took Arthur's arm. Lucy's breathing became harsh again, and all at once it stopped. "It is over," said Van Helsing. "She is dead." I led Arthur to the drawing room, where he sat down and covered his face with his hands, sobbing in a way that nearly broke my heart. Back in the bedroom, I found Van Helsing looking at poor Lucy, and his face was sterner than ever. I stood beside him and said, "Poor girl, there is peace for her at last. It is over." He turned to me and said solemnly, "Not true, sadly. Not so.